let's talk about Sweden. Do you want to explain the electoral system there and basically what happened?
Okay, so the electoral system in Sweden is proportional, and that means that you get the amount of mandates that you get as a percentage of the vote in the election. So it's not like in the UK or in the US where big parties get outsized for different reasons. But in Sweden, it's proportional, like in most of the rest of Western Europe, mainland Europe. And what has happened for some time now is that the parties have fragmented. There used to be, say, 40 or 50 years ago in Sweden, there used to be five parties in parliament. And now there are nine parties in parliament. So the big parties have shrunk considerably. And it's just much harder to govern. And it's going to be very hard to govern after this election too, even harder than it was already in the period before.
So, do you vote for a party? Is that how it works? Do you go in and you just vote for a party, or is there something more complicated where you vote for people?
You can choose candidates that represent or representative of the parties, but basically that doesn't matter very much. That's what you can say because the party whip is super, super strong. So on important issues in parliament, you the representatives basically don't have any choice but to go with the party line. You can't have like in the US where you have very centrist Republicans or very centrist Democrats who are against abortion and that kind of stuff. You don't really have that in Sweden. You have basically a party line, and any serious deviations from that party line will make you impossible as a representative for that party.
But when you go in to vote, like what's on the ballot?
Well, so we have a system where you take a slip of paper with a party name on, and there's one slip of paper for every different party. So if you're voting the moderates, you take one slip of paper, and if you're voting the Sweden Democrats or the Social Democrats, there is a separate slip of paper for them. And on that slip of paper, there are names, and you can cross a name on that list, or you can write in another name, and that's your personal vote for a specific representative for your district. And people can move up and down in that list based on who you cross off on that
So
list.
you vote for party and representative in the same on the same ballot, but the ballot you choose is the party you vote for.
Yes, yes.
And are those ballots out there in the open where people can see you take one?
They are out in the open, and we have become stricter about this so that only one person at a time can go and take those ballots, take the papers, and
Okay.
and then when you have taken them, you go back behind a screen and put your votes down in an envelope, and then you go towards the people who are I don't know what's the word for it the election people
Right. Yeah.
who put it in a box
And
for
it's
you
all
and
paper.
cross you off.
It's all done
Yeah,
on
it's all
paper.
paper.
Okay.
It's all paper.
That's probably good in a way. I think paper is better than electronic.
Paper is better, but the system that you take the ballots is kind of it's not how it's done in most other countries, and there are some minor incidents where people just grab all the ballots from, say, the Sweden Democrats and throw them away,
Hmm.
and there aren't any for the next few people coming, and someone has to point that out for there to be a refill of them. So there are kind of minor issues with that, but I don't think that's actually. I mean, you'll see a few people saying that that is like election cheating. But I don't think that has a major. It's not a major thing, but the system could be better.
I saw that Angry Foreigner was making a big deal out of election fraud. Do you think he's right, or do you think he's just?
He's a spastic kind of guy. I mean, he's very sympathetic. I think he's a nice dude,
Yeah.
but he's not super smart.
So you don't buy his idea that there's a lot of fraud in the or there was a lot of
I
fraud in this election.
Well, there are issues with, especially the Social Democrats, with what should you call it, implicit vote buying. That they go to the like the community, the heads of community in the ghetto areas,
Yeah.
or the imam or something like that, and they say, we promise that you will get this permit or this or that, and if you can deliver votes to us. I mean, you can see in some of these districts where there is a very, very heavy migrant population that the Social Democrats get 80% of the vote, and
Right.
then the left party get 10%, and then the rest 10% of the vote is split between all the other parties. And I mean, to me, that's an indication that there is a problem with the democracy in that area. There is something fishy going on. There are, in the north of Sweden, there are some areas where the Social Democrats are very strong, and there are some rich areas where the moderates are super strong. But I mean, they
Hmm.
don't get 80% of the vote there. They get 40 or 50 or 60, and then is a split among several different parties. It's not like this super strong uh, Saddam Hussein kind of turnout.
Yeah. Well, I think immigrants often vote as a bloc, though, because they don't have that sense of, being involved in the ideological discussions. They more have a sense of just being a separate group or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
I would imagine in Sweden, their vote would be almost entirely on the left.
Yes, it would be. It would be, but I mean, often a party like the Green Party, that is also on the left, of course. Well, they have no votes either. So, but they should have.
I see. Yeah.
They court the Muslim vote. They have Muslim representatives in some. I mean, there has been scandals with very Islamist representatives in the Green Party. So they should have some amount of the vote. And you should remember that the Social Democrats are super entrenched in Swedish society. They have a party organization that is, it's hard to explain for someone who's not Swedish.
What economic interests do they represent?
The Social Democrats.
Yeah.
Um, well, I mean, classically they have been allied with the union movement, but that's waning, one should say. Their voter base is basically now uh, old people, pensioners,
Mm.
um, who have voted for the same party for all their lives, and immigrants. And that's why the amount of votes they got 28% in this election. Um, and the expectations were that they were going to be a bit smaller than that, maybe 23, 24, 25.
Yeah. Wasn't
And
there a
that's
big
why
difference
that's
between?
very
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
that's very alarming that they got that, because that means that maybe they can make the transition from courting both those voter bases, the old people and the immigrants, to just courting the immigrants as the immigrant bloc grows.
And probably the young leftist types who are energized by the rise of the far right.
Yeah, but I don't know that movement is that large.
Probably has a appearance of being larger than it is because it's very noisy.
Yeah, and I think those guys go to the. I mean, the Social Democrats are the pragmatist party and the big party. So those votes mostly go to the Green Party or the Left Party, I think, or as formally the feminist initiative that was basically eradicated in this election.
Well, I would expect the immigrants are not going to vote for the feminists, so that's kind of funny.
No, that's only cosmopolitan women,
Yeah.
basically. And they had their big surge in the last election. They got 3% of the vote nationally in the last election, something like that. And but
Okay.
this time, just the debate was just never in their corner. Didn't stand a chance because everything was about immigration and healthcare. And, that's not their subject.
It's amazing how feminism has just taken a huge backseat to the whole, like, anti-racism thing in the social justice movement.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that, there's no sincerity about these things.
Yeah.
Um, well, why do you think there was such a discrepancy between the polls and the results?
Well, I mean, this is just speculation because we haven't seen how the voter flows actually were. I guess we'll see that in a few weeks or months. But I think the polls that were most correct in the last election were most wrong in this election on the Sweden Democrats. So that was kind of a mind fucker. But I think that what could have happened at the last minute is that as the election grew closer, it turned into more of an election about who was going to be the prime minister. So it's the same basic dynamics that happens in a U.S. presidential election, that people abandon, like the Jill Stein and whomever, Gary Johnson, at the last minute, and then they vote for the one they prefer, the least bad alternative of the viable alternatives.
Okay.
And for the basic power structure in parliament, it doesn't really matter that much if the Sweden Democrats are, like now, I think they ended up at 17%, or if they got 22 or 23 or something like that. It doesn't matter. The difference between the center left bloc and the center right bloc now is just one mandate in parliament. I don't know if that can still change because they haven't counted overseas voting yet, but I don't think it will change.
Are the mandates based on just the pure popular vote? They're not broken out by district or anything like that first?
There are some complications to that. We don't need to get into that, but basically it's the popular vote. Basically, it's not as strictly split up as in maybe in Canada. I don't know.
Our system is we aggregate at the local level and then we aggregate again. So the government is based on the majority of the seats, and the seats are based on local majorities.
There are some aspects of how mandates are dealt up. They are committed to one district here, but basically there won't be any huge discrepancies between the mandates that the party get and the popular vote in all of the country. Basically, that's the case.
Okay. I kind of prefer that system to what we have, although every system has its problems.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you get the split between the cosmopolitan areas, of course, that are more at least more left wing, but also much more liberal in the open border sense, and and then all the other areas who are more get the brunt of the refugees maybe, and also are more skeptical. So if we had a US system in place where the rural areas have more power, we would have a maybe not
Well,
so dire a situation.
the US system is really weird, yeah. I mean, that's one of the weirdest systems in the world, I think.
Yeah.
Canada's system is much simpler, but it's a majority of majorities, and so basically fringe parties get no representation. Like, you have to appeal to them at least Well, the only time parties get representation is if they represent a geographical fringe, like Quebec separatism can elect people to the parliament,
Mm.
but something like, say, a Green Party or a nationalist party, something like that, would probably not be able to elect anyone, even though they might be able to get 10 or 20% of the vote overall. But because that's spread out over the country,
Mm.
it would never be reflected in the government or the parliament.
It's like the Liberal Party in the UK. They never get any power at all, despite them being pretty big.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think they have the same basic system that we do. All right. So, were you very black pilled? Because you were hoping for something a lot better, right? You were hoping that they would become the largest party, or at least you were hoping for a better result, right?
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't only hoping. I thought that they were going to be bigger too. Um, and yeah, I was a bit black-pilled because it speaks to how little time there is with the demographic changes that we are experiencing, and the problem is like the Social Democrats are the rhetoric on the borders has become kind of strict, but if you do the basic calculation on their voter base, you see that they have no incentives whatsoever to police the borders.
Well, they might have incentives in that the effect of uncontrolled immigration is to push people to the right and or to create social chaos.
Yes, but since they didn't lose that many votes
Yeah, no,
when,
it's they don't
when
have
they're
enough
still
of
in
an
the chaos.
incentive, but yeah.
Yeah. So they lost 3%, I think, of the vote since the last election, and um, in perspective of the things that has happened since that election, that's a major success for them, I would say.
Yeah. You would think that some of the terrorist attacks in Europe would have tipped the scales, and of course they had an effect, but I'm just surprised that there hasn't been a bigger reaction in Europe uh, in terms of moving to the right. So I'm a little bit black pilled too, but I'm a pessimist by nature, so I'm not that surprised. Okay, so I'm just curious about the culture in Sweden. What do people think about the future? What do you think people think the future is going to be like, and do they care about the future?
um, I don't get the sense that they are thinking about it in such a macro picture, really, because if we're talking about like the cosmopolitan left, the cosmopolitan liberals, um, and liberals are basically centrists here. Um, they just have the perspective that things are looking good for them. I mean, they are professionals, they have good pay, and
But is that even
things are looking
true
up for
though?
them.
I mean, is that really true? Are things really that great for them because they live in a city and they pay high taxes and
I think they still think that at least, and I mean, I think we are in for some pretty bad things happening with like the pension system, the healthcare system, the strains on the healthcare systems have only just started, I think, and people are so. Um, I think the illusion is still there, and mm, it's hard to predict what will happen when the illusion is finally shattered. Will they just double down, or will they experience, I mean, cognitive dissonance? And I have no idea what will happen at that point, actually.
we've had 50 years of singing Imagine, right? Like
Yeah.
at some point people have to say, okay, this isn't real. This isn't going to happen, like I just think with the trans stuff, like it seems like the left is getting more and more hysterical, right? Like they're approaching a singularity of insanity, that there has to be a phase transition at some point because how can they go on believing in this insane stuff?
I mean, they don't really reason from what they imagine the future to be. They reason from like first principles of rights and human value, and I mean, they never go beyond that basically to make their arguments. It's never a pragmatist look. It's just moral. Yeah, it's just I don't get the sense that people are really thinking about the trade-offs between different decisions and
But still, people must have some vision of the future, I think, to, like people need things to live for that are beyond themselves, that go beyond just their, day to day lives and stuff.
yeah, isn't that just a technology kind of angle
Technology will
that
just keep
people
getting better. Well,
yeah,
but
yeah, we will have like electric cars and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, but that dream must be fading away too.
One would think, yeah, but
Like, I mean, because it seems to me that in Canada and in the United States, there is no vision of the future, and this is something I noticed as absent because when I was a kid, it seemed like the future was on everybody's mind. Like futurism was a big part of the culture, but today I don't see any futurism that isn't dark.
well, I think I disagree with that because I see this large strain of futurism, but it's a kind of a surface level futurism. It isn't it isn't like the Star Trek vision. It's more like
Steven Pinker.
yeah, Steven Pinker, but it's the Silicon Valley kind. It's all about just gadgets and
Hmm.
like VR, and it's never about utility, and it's all about like video games and and entertainment and. But I think I see lots of like this. The cosmopolitan people are very into futurism, so I don't think I agree with the take that there is no futurism angle today.
Do you think they have some vision of the future that is like some kind of techno version of Imagine,
Yeah.
basically?
Yes. Yeah. That's very well described. Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. I don't know. I'd really like to get inside the head of some of these people. I just don't understand what young people today in the West think is going to come out of this. And I mean, like when you show leftists or so-called liberals basic facts like basic demographic trends and stuff like that, their usual response is simply to shut it out. Just
Yeah.
say that that's racist.
I mean, I have tried to argue this with people, and I mean, I know lots of people who know econ, know finance. I mean, they know the concept of compound interest, and they know how the exponential growth works. They know that because I mean, they work with that in numbers all the time,
Yeah.
and still, I can't. I mean, I can't get through to some people, I should say, because overall that's kind of funny because like in the US the finance community is not all that right wing, but in Sweden it's super right wing overall. Maybe not as right wing as me, but yeah.
I think, yeah, I guess it's just a kind of framing thing that once people get into those issues, they turn off the pragmatic frame, they turn on a moral frame, and they just can't think about it rationally. It doesn't matter what's going to happen in the future because this is good and that's bad.
Yeah, it's like they have cordoned off that bit of uh,
Mental real estate.
yeah. They don't do dispassionate analysis in that area.
Yeah. Well, back to the election and then we can wrap it up, I guess. What do you
Yep.
think is going to happen then with this split between the center right, the center left, and then the
Mm.
Sweden Democrats out there on the fringe holding what is it, 18% or 17%
Mm.
of the mandates?
Yeah,
So
something
what's
like that.
how's it going to shake out in terms of actual, like a government being formed and all that?
It's basically impossible to predict. Uh, the center-right alliance, they demanded that the prime minister should uh, hand in his resignation,
Hmm.
and they did that last night on election night. And the prime minister refused, but in 2 weeks, when Parliament opens, there will be voting on the prime minister, and he can't have the majority of Parliament against him if he is to stay. But he has the majority of Parliament against him because the right wing alliance will vote against him, and the Sweden Democrats have said they will vote against him too. The problem is that there isn't another candidate. So the right wing alliance leader, the moderate party leader, he's the other prime minister candidate. And at the moment, it's impossible to see how he can survive a vote in parliament either. So something has to give, and all the parties have staked out. As the positions are staked out, nobody can get through parliament.
So basically, if they all keep their election promises, it's impossible to govern Sweden.
Exactly. Yes, and it's impossible to get a budget through the parliament too.
Ah, what's more likely, the center right making an accommodation with the center left and becoming kind of the governing force because they're in the middle, or the center right merging with the Sweden Democrats to, well, either
The
way,
center,
doesn't it seem like the
the
center
center,
right is going to govern essentially?
yes, in some way, the moderate part. I think so. That the moderate party leader will become prime minister in some way, but the alliance as it stands, uh, it will if they can't seek cooperation with the Sweden Democrats because there are two parties there, the Liberals and the Center Party, who um, I don't see. It's impossible for them to cooperate with the Sweden Democrats in any which way. They can't even talk to them, or they will. I don't know. Their leaders would have to leave, and their voters wouldn't accept it. So it's impossible for them.
Can
But
the moderate party talk to the Sweden Democrats?
well, I think that the moderate and the Christian Democrats that are like the right wing of the alliance uh, together. I think they could make some accommodations to the Sweden Democrats and maybe rule in a super um, tiny minority government. That that is my bet, but that I'm sure that won't happen for quite some time yet. Under maybe under imminent threat of extra election, maybe then it will happen. Otherwise, if that doesn't happen, I think the most viable constellation is the Social Democrats alone in government, and then they will seek support from the two liberals and the Center Party and the Green Party primarily and the Left Party, and that would be a disaster because if that happens somewhere down the line, um, there the immigration issue is well, you can imagine.
You think they'll just maintain the current levels or even
Yeah,
increase them to
yep,
just get
yep,
the?
yes. That there is no other possibility. Even if that constellation rules, that will happen. The current status quo will either be maintained or the levels will increase. That's the only thing that
Hmm.
could happen
What
if
is
that
what is the position of the moderate party on immigration?
basically they want to lower it.
Okay.
Um, it's complicated because there are always specific small issues that are at the on the agenda, but basically they want to lower it. Yeah.
Well, then hopefully they form the ruling coalition.
Yeah.
But it seems like you're not as hopeful as before, last time we talked, anyway.
Well, at that point, I mean, I'm still hopeful that the opinions of the public will keep um, going right wing. I still think that it's just that this election indicates that it won't be fast enough.
Well, at least it's something. The Sweden Democrats went up a bit.
Yeah, they went up a lot, just not as much as was expected.
Well, but wasn't it only about 4 or 5% though? I mean, it wasn't that much.
Well, in proportion to their share of the vote, it was a lot. But I mean, okay, they didn't double like they have done in the last two elections. So they were disappointed on the night. The Sweden Democrats. That was clear for all to see that they had expected more. But something happened at the end of the election, and it's kind of like the moderates and the social democrats circumvened the the issues of the Sweden Democrats. So they had to kind of stake out the position further to the right. They had to talk about leaving the EU, and they also lifted the question of repatriation, and because I guess their calculation was that they needed to do something like that to get some more airing time, to get some more
Like media attention?
media attention. Yeah, and I think that calculation was bad because the EU issue is dead in the water in Sweden right now. I mean, there is massive support for EU membership, and there are good reasons for that too. We are heavily export dependent,
Yeah.
and much more so than the UK, for
Where does
example.
IKEA stand on all of this?
Well, IKEA are situated in the Netherlands, so I don't think they
Wait
care
a
that
second.
much.
Wait a second. Whoa, back up. IKEA is in the Netherlands?
Yeah, I mean, they are a Swedish company from the beginning, of course,
Yeah.
but they are owned by it's called a Stichting. It's a special special thing they have in the Netherlands, so they don't have to pay taxes, basically.
Oh, I
So
see. Yeah, okay. Interesting. Well, yeah, I just don't. I would imagine you're sort of export driven and import driven as well. You need a lot of imports
yeah,
from around the world. But wait, is Norway is not part of the EU though, right?
no, they're part of what's it called in English, the ESS. So they have a free trade agreement with the EU, but they're not part of the EU,
Yeah.
and they pay lots of money towards the EU.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yes, to basically a fee for maintaining that free trade agreement.
And Norway is super rich with all the oil money, right? Like,
Oh yeah, super rich. Yes.
so. By the way, like, yeah, I'm curious. So you said Norway has gone more to the right. I don't know much about them. They have a right wing government in power. Is that right?
Yes. Or yeah, they are in government. Yes. So the Populist Party in Norway is in government with the regular right wing party, and in Denmark they are not in government, but they are like a support party for the right wing government in Denmark.
Okay, so Denmark and Norway are have a harder line on immigration than Sweden.
Way harder. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially Denmark, I would say.
Okay. So you could still flee to Denmark or Norway if things get bad in Sweden.
As long as we are all, yeah, I could. Yeah. I guess I could flee to somewhere in the EU too. I mean, that's
Italy.
Still, yeah, maybe. I mean, the thing, not specifically for me, but the thing is, it's hard for Swedes to move to other countries that have better policies because there aren't so many within the EU. That is because there aren't so many countries. They're a lot poorer than us. So why would you at this point?
Right. Yeah, Poland, you could go there, but you're not going to get a good job in Poland, kind of thing.
No, I mean, Poland has done great, but they're piss poor compared to Swedes
Right,
generally.
right.
So
Yeah, a lot of this is the disease of affluence, like the more affluent you are, the more everything is about signaling, the more everything is a status competition.
sadly, yes. But I mean, the more I think about it, I think I said something about this the other day. But the more I think about it, the more I think that like it's the left wing will always gain ground when there is no credible threat of war or invasion or something like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, good luck, Sweden. Hope you guys pull through.
Thanks, we'll need it.
Yeah. All right, man.
Well,
Good,
yeah.
good
Take
talking to you.
care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.